Welcome to the DeFi Standard. This is Patty XRP, and today we got a really exciting episode as we will be interviewing Dr. Anish Mohammed, one of the co-founders and the CTO of the Panther Protocol. So Anish, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. And to start off, can you enlighten the audience with some background around your career in blockchain, cryptography, and DeFi?
Sure, I can give it a try.
Yeah.
So I wander around quite a bit. So my career early on, I went to med school. When I finished med school, I was hired by Ericsson to build a micropayment system in 2000. And then, I went to do research in cryptography. I was in various labs, four of them, including Microsoft Research, until like 2007. I left from the research to do some consulting, work for Accenture and CAP. And then when I did some retail banking until 2017, and 2017, I decided I had enough of it and went full time into crypto. So crypto story is a long one. As with a lot of people in the cryptography mailing list, I saw the Bitcoin white paper, read it, and I went, the usual. And yeah, until 2011, 2012, nothing much happened. In Hackerspace in London, which I was also involved in some sense, we had a workshop we ran to actually help people teach mine Bitcoin. That happened. And then in 2013, I ran into one of the early investors of Ripple. And at that point in time, there was this conversation between me and a bunch of folks in Ripple. They asked me if I'd be an advisor. I accepted. So from October 17, 2013, until Stefan left, I was an advisor to them. Then further down the line, I happen to know a couple of the people that were in the original Ethereum team. That's Vinay, Victor Tron, to name a couple. So, Victor asked me if I would help him with uh, the Swamp paper, as in like reviewing the paper. And then I ended up becoming one of the original reviewers of the Ethereum Orange paper or the Swamp paper. And I've given a couple of Swamp Summit talks, loosely affiliated with them, and then kind of walked away a bit because, Ethereum wasn't moving at the pace I was hoping it would. And then I ended up getting distracted by other things. So in total, so far, I've worked on probably close to half a dozen layer one protocols and probably like a dozen dApps. The well-known ones that I've worked in some capacity, Pillar, Ocean, Boson. Mostly my interest is in the thing called protocol design and what I would describe as applied cryptoeconomics. Some people call it token engineering. And I have significant interest in secure multi-party compute and zero-knowledge proof systems. That's kind of my summary.
Absolutely. It seems like you've definitely been around the block when it comes to crypto. So I'm sure all those experiences have, kind of shaped where you are today in some way or another. But yeah, so to get into Panther Protocol, which is what you are now working on, I kind of want to, as we cover Flare Network here, I
Sure.
was curious since you guys went ahead and put out a press release with the Flare team
Yeah.
that you guys are going to partner up in the future. And I was
Yeah.
curious what you guys are excited about Flare Network as it hasn't even launched yet and, isn't really proven at this point, and what you see as
Okay.
possibilities. Yeah.
Okay, so let me put a bunch of caveats there. They will be released very soon. If I'm not mistaken, from my conversation with Hugo, in like the next couple of weeks, things should all be there. So I've been playing around a bit with whatever that's happening on the other side of the fence. I met up with Hugo. The conversation between Hugo and me has been going on since September 2020. So we started the conversation about oracles. So I see a Flare as an interesting, a very interesting model, interesting bridge, and interesting approach towards enterprises, right? So if you think about it, so, I don't know how many of the people in the audience would really recognize Codius. So Codius was the smart contract language that Ripple actually had at one point in time. And in 2014, we decided not to do anything about it. So one of the challenges we have in XRP is the fact that we don't have an ability to attach policy to data. That's what I call smart contracts, right? a virtual instance of a physical dispenser machine. Like, you put the money in, you press a button. If the state is right, it'll push out whatever you ask for. Literally, that's what it is. So that is the first piece that actually is going to be in Flare, literally allowing the XRP world to access the ability to use smart logic in that sense. And then the next piece is like, there's a very interesting construct of oracles that's also being built. That's also pretty interesting. And from a Panther side, what we were interested in is like, okay, for us, any of the large peer chains turning up would be a very good opportunity to collaborate. Because if you are a new network emerging, which has a very large, how could I say, very large volume, locked on the other side, and you are getting into DeFi or Panther, we are very keen to provide the bridge to the DeFi in a privacy sense. And our conversation with the Flare team, they really seem to care about privacy. And to us, this was like, okay, this is an interesting opportunity. A bunch of people who are actually building one existing protocol, adding new value, adding something new in terms of oracles, providing this opportunity to enhance the possibility of DeFi. And there is also the institutional focus that Flare is bringing in. And as you probably all know, a lot of the holders of XRPs are institutions, right? And they haven't really got into DeFi in that sense. So, both Panther and for Flare, in one sense of speaking, this is also one of the extra bit that actually, got us to work together to make this happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was really interesting. And we definitely are familiar with Codius. That's a fun topic of conversation out there. But
Oh,
Mickey, I wanted to
okay.
see if you have any additional questions add on what Honest just said.
Yeah, that was fascinating. So are the signal providers kind of like the evolution of what Codius was, and now they're able to put them out there and have smart contracts? I mean, they bring the price feeds in. Is that pretty much one of the components of Flare that Panther would tap into? Is the possibility of the price feeds?
Not just that. I mean, let me rephrase it in a slightly different way, right?
Okay.
So price feeds, absolutely. Smart contracts, absolutely. But the thing here is like, for you to have a bridge, for Panther to have a bridge on the other side, you need to have something that actually has a smart logic in that sense, right? So we are planning to do an interchain DEX. And the other thing is like, if you want to create institutional products, which actually need to verify things, right? Like you're running arbitrary, how can I say, derivative things that you want to build. For that to have any logic, and that actually wants to get some data from the real world, oracles are really important. And oracles, like, imagine even if you want to run a DEX, right? You definitely end up actually requiring some price feeds, and there are different mechanisms. But if you have a somewhat, how could I describe, an oracle mechanism that's secure, which doesn't really, depend on the economic security of the underlying, right? And this is kind of how I see it. Yeah, this is how I kind of see it. It's like, it's decoupling the security, cryptoeconomic security margin of the oracle from the protocol in that sense. So that to me is interesting. So if you're an institutional, you want to come in, you want to create a synthetic thing, which actually a synthetic product, which actually uses an oracle mechanism, and you want to use privacy, that is the kind of place where Panther is really trying to fit in, where we do the KYC, we do the selective disclosure. So when you come in, you want to do KYC if you want to, you go to a third party, you have a proof of verify mechanism, you get the proof, you keep it there, you go through the transactions, you run your strategy, your alpha is not locked, there's no alpha leakage, there's no front running, there's no sandwiching, no back running. End of the day, when you're all done, if IRS comes to you or UK HMRC comes to you, you can go to the selective disclosure and go, yeah, this is it. So, as an institution, A, you get your KYC. B, you have the ability to prove to your regulator that you haven't actually done anything silly. C, you actually have this synthetic product that you created that actually wants to have an oracle mechanism that has higher security margin than anything else can provide. And the oracle is not incentivized to actually do anything funny, right? So these are the kind of things to me, like, really, makes me think that this could be a very good combination.
Yes, it sounds like that. That in the whole concept of interchain dexes, is this something Flare and Panther seem to be two projects that I've come across that are doing this, really creating interchain dexes where, Uniswap is kind of one of the first there.
Yeah.
So you need all this for the security, right, to get that done.
Yep.
We're very familiar with Proteus, so I understand that concept.
Yeah.
It's one of the things, like, every product and every this is an institutional question in that sense. You have I see a startup as a constraint optimization problem in a machine learning sense, right? You have a bunch of constraints and you want to get to the global maxima rather than the local maxima. So you make a bunch of choices, and you need to make a bunch of choices as fast as you can. And sometimes you make the good choice, sometimes you make the bad choice, but end of the day, it doesn't really matter. Things happen and teams move on.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can definitely see where, with what you're saying, institutional, which Flare is definitely trying to tackle, and then that on-chain Oracle system paired with the privacy that Panther's offering seems to be,
Absolutely.
I'm really excited for when that happens. So now to really get into, the Panther protocol, I wanted to start off with the Panther token. So I was wondering if you could go over just some general tokenomics, use cases, and why an institution or an individual would want to own it.
Okay. So the way I would, let me describe the thesis of Panther, because it actually ties into a whole bunch of things.
Okay, cool.
So, so everything needs to come in. I can't just describe tokenomics on a standalone thing because we're using some game theoretic security, it's game theoretic privacy primitives. So that's kind of driven by ZKP. So I need to explain the whole mental model in that sense. So I kind of divide the world into two halves. One where there's the notion of privacy, and other there's no notion of privacy, and there's an arbitrage between the two. Imagine you have Facebook in one and Facebook in another. Like, the arbitrage is different. You can actually having different prices for the same ad in two worlds, right? This is exactly what is happening. So what Panther is trying to do is to provide privacy combining two things. So first is zero knowledge proofs. So essentially, if you think of it in a very simple sense, in the room I am right now, I have a door over there, say, Patty, if you are over here, I say to you, I have the ability to escape from this room without actually using the door. You are, I am the prover, you are the verifier, you close the door behind me. 2 minutes later, I'm outside, so you know that I have the ability to escape. This is zero knowledge proof, okay? The thing that I can provide you with the zero knowledge proof that I can escape from this room is not really useful in providing privacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if there's a room of one, if the person is there, that's me, right?
Yeah.
But imagine I have an auditorium of 100,000 people, and now if you actually know I am in there, you have a chance of guessing 1 in 100,000 that it's me. And this is the game theoretic part of Panther. So this is why I was kind of saying, like, I need to bring all the things together to actually explain. So effectively, we are kind of incentivizing people to go into the auditorium, right? So this is where ZKP comes in. So going into the auditorium is like providing liquidity to the privacy pool. So that's where you get returns in ZKP. And when you actually want to use the protocol, you need to pay some fees, and you have to pay fees using ZKP. And then the next question is, like, given this is a decentralized protocol, how are we going to actually govern this thing, right? So we literally want to allow the protocol to decide whatever they want to do. So once it reaches the threshold where the stability criterion is met, we would allow the protocol to do whatever the hell they want to do. So the first of the things is, like, what is the threshold that you want to set? So one of the things I wanted to say is, like, if you have read the white paper, there's in section 9.3, we kind of describe this equilibrium status for privacy, as in like privacy pricing. Essentially what that means is, like, when you have 100,000 people in there, the cost of privacy is very low. So it's like you go into McDonald's and then they give you the smoothie for $1 extra, right? It's like, otherwise you would never buy that thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have this extra thing that's an extra benefit, which it's so the delta is so tiny, so you kind of go for it, because privacy is not going to be free in that sense. We want to make it so low, the price of privacy is so low that the delta you don't really you don't notice, right? So that's the whole idea. So the ZKP is going to be used for governance, it's used to be for rewarding liquidity mining, and it's also used for actually paying fees. That's the very least.
Cool. Awesome. And I do believe it's going to be a 1 billion token cap supply, correct?
Yeah, that's what we decided to do. I mean,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah, and then I also noticed, so it's funny because you brought up token engineering is one of the things you're really interested in, and
Yeah,
we cover a lot of that stuff, especially with Flare, like in mechanism design.
yeah.
So I noticed in the white paper it said that 40% of the total supply is being reserved to reward the early participants, basically in the network. Could you get into that a little bit?
So I think it's not the early participants in that sense. It's
Okay.
remember I was telling you the people who go into the auditorium. That's what it means.
Okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
so it's like we need to have two levels of security in one sense of speaking. So when we are going to have an interchain DEX, there'll be a bunch of staking. There is also the real privacy pools, right? So both of them needs to be incentivized. We can't actually ask anybody to do anything for free. There is no such thing as free lunch. There should not be a tragedy of commons. Privacy should come as part and parcel of the protocol, and everybody who actually works or contributes to it should benefit. That is one of the prime things that we in Panther believe in. Openness, fairness, these are things that we really believe in.
Gotcha. Yeah. So it's kind of just an incentive mechanism for people
Yes,
helping to provide that privacy
yes,
in the sense. Okay, cool.
yes, yeah.
And then also, I know you guys aren't releasing info about exchanges and stuff to purchase, but we should be able to purchase the Panther token somewhere in Q3, so within the next three
Yes,
months. Would
yeah,
it be available
absolutely.
on Uniswap out of curiosity?
I haven't looked at a listing anywhere yet because there are a whole bunch of things that'll happen. Uniswap, anybody could list it, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's nothing, nothing stopping anybody from doing
Okay,
that.
fair enough.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I recognize what you're asking, but the reason I am being hesitant is the following, right? I want to have the price discovery for privacy, get to a steady state before you open the gates of hell in that sense, right?
Hmm.
Because otherwise what will happen is the price of privacy will be pumped up. I want the price of privacy to come down, not up, right? If the price of privacy comes down to my burger plus the smoothie kind of situation,
Hmm.
only then that the average user can actually go in and just use Panther, the delta between the normal usage, which is like the charge, gas charges or protocol charges wherever you are in the world, I mean protocol world, right? And the delta being the tiniest, that's the thing to me that we need to actually figure out and get it to the right place. And hopefully the community will work towards that, I hope.
Okay. Yeah, and I don't know if you'll be able to answer this follow-up, which totally understandable if not, but do you anticipate that US citizens will be able to have a way to purchase this? Just because I know many times when I try and get into a project I'm interested in, like often it's not available on exchanges that I have access to.
I honestly, I
Not
don't
yet.
know. I am not a
All
lawyer.
good. Hey, totally
I,
fair.
I, I,
You're the technical guy.
yeah, I mean, I am many things, but not a lawyer.
Cool. All right. Well, I appreciate that. And then I know, so you were kind of talking about the game theory
Yeah,
behind everything. Do you have
yeah.
anything else you can add to the mechanism design, or do you think you fully covered that with your last part?
Yeah, I mean, I can go into a lot of things, but the summary is like, okay, so, let me walk through this thinking a bit. So I kind of will allude to the adversarial models and how these things are supposed to
Yes.
work in that sense, and kind of describe the pools. And the problem is like, you and I can actually talk for hours and hours on mechanism design
Yeah.
and game theory, and people who are supposed to listen to this will lose their hair, right? They'll be bored. But let me try explain it in a slightly different sense. So the thing I was about to say was like, you can have different assets in different pools. And one of the things that can happen is like, different pools could have different returns. So one of the things that we thought about was like, can we actually get to a equilibrium condition for this? So if people, move between pools on a very regular basis, the churn is kind of unstable. You need to get to a steady state in that sense. So it's like we, thought about two possible paths. One is you can actually have a pool, a privacy pool that actually have multi assets, or you can have one pool with one asset. So we kind of looked into a lot of detail for single pool assets. And in the white paper, we are kind of describing the steady state for that. And kind of we have some code that's there. If somebody wants to run it, they can actually run this thing, and that'll give you like a notion of what the steady state would look like. And Yeah, I mean, I don't know what would you like me to go into detail? I know you want me to go into details of like the cost of doing things in various levels. How could you actually bring the cost of doing things or moving things from one layer to the next, or trade-offs of actually doing things in a particular manner? Or
So you know what? I know what we can parlay this into. So
okay,
can you kind of explain, since Panther Protocol is going to be layer one and layer two components, kind of
yeah,
how those fit in together and play
sure,
off each other?
absolutely. Yeah, okay. So let me try the game. So the game starts in layer one in that sense. Everybody's in layer one, okay?
Hmm.
But the problem right now is like, until a few weeks back, was the cost of doing transactions in Ethereum was horrible. So if you could recognize, like, if you're going to use Snox and you want to do transactions in layer one, this is going to be horribly expensive. So the way to play the game, given that we are starting in Ethereum day one, is to actually do that in L2. And in one sense of speaking, we can think of like two bridges on both sides. Kind of think, for the layer one, it will look like a layer two, but it's actually another separate layer one that's sat underneath it, right? So you could, let's take the case of Ethereum, just use the example so that
Hmm.
it's clearer for people to understand. So in Ethereum, when you attach a layer one, whether XStar or Polygon, it's actually a whole bloody blockchain in one sense of speaking, right? It has its own consensus, it's all those things. That's a bridge that goes both ways, right? So that's essentially what it is. For the layer one, it actually looks like a bridge and there's something else on the other side. So you could actually do the same thing for Panther as well. So essentially, given that we want to achieve privacy and we want to actually do some Snox, and we want to do that in a cheap manner. So we kind of decided, what, stick it in the layer two. So, somebody coming in from a layer one, it will be much cheaper. And because you are doing rollups in there, you can provide privacy as a fringe benefit in a manner of speaking. Does that
Oh,
make sense?
yeah. So you guys are going to be utilizing ZK rollups on Ethereum then?
It doesn't have to be Ethereum as such. The
Yeah.
ZK rollups,
Okay.
yeah. ZK rollups could be anywhere. ZK rollups in Ethereum could be one path to do that in Ethereum, but ZK rollups would be like the mechanism in L2 that will provide us with the privacy that we need, if
Okay.
I could put it that way. Yeah.
Yes, I gotcha. And
Yeah.
so since earlier you kind of did like a, whole what is a zero knowledge proof in your example with being in a room and being able to get
Yeah.
out, could
Yeah.
you expand on what is the snark subset? So the ZK snarks you guys.
Sure. Sure. Okay, so if you look at the world of zero knowledge proof systems, you could actually kind of divide like two or three in that sense. There's bulletproofs, which is like the security of that is kind of integer factorization in one sense of speaking. That's one. Then you have the class of false Snox, which is actually the non-interactive version of zero knowledge proof, which actually requires a setup. And the security of that is actually based on security of elliptic curve discrete law problem. And then you have Starks, which doesn't require a setup. So it uses Fry. Essentially, what that means is it has some information theoretic properties. So, a security of a hash function or a pseudo-random function is the thing that actually provides security in there. So the left to the right in that sense, imaginary sense, you have Starks, which has no setup, hash functions, somewhat longer proofs and things of that sort. Then Snarks in the middle, which came first in a sense of speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the early papers were in like 2013, Pinocchio and the rest of it, and then there was a whole bunch of them that happened, which requires a setup where the prover and verifier. So in theory, if I were to take the example of Patty, you and I actually trying to do that thing, before we could do the prover verifier thing, we need to actually do a setup process, and both of us end up with two keys, a prover key and a verification key, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what Snark is, Snarks would work. And then if it's a bulletproof, it's much more straightforward. Again, doesn't require a setup. It's like a pretty straightforward thing. So that's the three that are there. And there is a lot of movement in between. So if you look at Halo, Halo has some properties of, both, Starks and Snarks in the sense. What I mean by that is like it doesn't require a setup, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, we probably are going to start with somewhere in the Snark land. And I am kind of interested in Halo, as in like, set up less Snarks. And at this moment in time, you can't actually have, Halo kind of thing on Ethereum because of the size of the proof and other things. wouldn't allow us to do the magic over there, right? So we have to think about when all these good things could be done and how we will do all of this. Did I hand wave enough?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Nikki, I want to see if you have any questions since we touched on a lot since you last hopped in.
I have a few, but let's they're in
go
kind
for
of a
it.
different direction.
Okay.
So regarding like the interchain decks, like that really fascinated me because Flare and Panther were two that we've come across where this model is actually taken it outside of actually the blockchains, and they're connecting different networks together.
Yep.
What other networks will Panther protocol be able to also connect to besides Ethereum and Flare?
Oh, yeah. So like we are
Still
being in
there.
conversation. Yeah. So I can probably name one or two, and we are in conversation with a couple of people. So Firo is one set of people that we have been. They're a privacy protocol in that sense. So it's like in that sense they have their own fully private blockchain in that sense. And if they want to access DeFi in that sense, this would be another mechanism. So the way at least I think of it, and most of my team thinks of it, is the following, right? You could think of it as castles and bazaars in that sense, right? So protocols are like castles and bazaars, like the interchain, interspersed place. And what Panther is trying to do is like, at least for this space in between, provide the same kind of security and the flexibility that the castles are giving for people who are living inside. So that's one way to think about it.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah. And on top of that, I guess, so is Panther gonna have like its own kind of like node system that's running for it with like consensus, or is it tapping into the blockchains it's gonna connect with?
So, okay, I'm going to be a bit vague in here because
Okay.
both are possibilities. Okay, it is a very, very likely possibility that we might just go to have a full layer one, because like if you want to do an interchain DEX, you need to have your own consensus to a largest degree, because if you actually, depend on your, peer chains for your security will be kind of, I mean, I'm not going to say compromise, but you can think of it this way. If you have like N peer chains, pretty much the highest security you will have will be the security of the lowest cryptoeconomic security margin of the lowest peer chain in that sense, if that makes sense to you, right?
Yes.
So for me, that is not something I'm very keen on. I would like to keep our security margin as high as cryptoeconomically possible, as in like the cost function of actually running consensus has a cost attached to it, and I don't want to bring that up too high, but I absolutely want to provide the right kind of security margin.
Cool. So you guys are still kind of figuring that part out, exactly what you'll ultimately do.
Yes.
Cool. All right. That's
Yes.
totally fair answer. And yeah, so one of the things, could you do like a hybrid? So like what Flare is doing to like digest state changes on other blockchains is the validators that run the like federated Byzantine agreement consensus on the Flare network are actually going to be running on the underlying chains too. So it's like a hybrid almost.
Yeah. It is a very possible thing that one could do. It's the question is like, what are the trade-offs you have, right? Like, so you could look at, as a veteran of, half a dozen blockchains, and at least, I've worked on a few of them very closely. I don't want to go into details, but I'm sure you can figure out like who I helped and what I have worked on. So my experience is like one has to be very careful before. It's like measure like 10 times before you cut. So this is really what I say. Like, I would not actually go deploy things in a known returnable manner until I'm 100% sure that the ecosystem is actually going the right direction. Because the problem mostly is like when you actually design consensus mechanisms with the hope that a particular ecosystem is going to have a particular behavior, if that ecosystem doesn't take that behavior, doesn't have the cryptographic security margin, then you have a problem, right? So that's something you need to think about. If at any point in time, if you build a protocol and if the protocol that you're building is dependent on other protocol and the other protocols, cryptographic security margin is the thing that you are depending on, then you're putting a constraint on yourself. And that might mean that at some point in time you want to change something, you won't be able to. And I would like to keep that as late as possible. So for me right now, it's like I can actually do like very simply put, like day one, like an L2, using an L2 to create an L1 on both sides. And then when do I get to a place where I have a full L1 built out, and whatever pieces I want to solve, because I have a bunch of hard problems I would like to solve. I don't want to go into a lot of detail because like these are things that I really don't want to go into
Yeah,
detail in
no.
public. Yeah, okay.
That's
So
an interesting way that you put it, is that
yeah,
it can transform into an L1 like once you have enough
yes,
built out. So I have never
absolutely,
thought of it
yes,
that way. So that's very
yes,
interesting. Yeah.
yes. So in theory, every L1, if you attach a bridge, it doesn't care what it is on the other side, right? It just assumes a particular behavior and you get what that thing is, and that's what it is. So you could actually have an L2 to behave like an L1, and you can actually have a true L1 to behave like an L2, right?
Hmm.
So you could start off with an L2 as an L1 and then go build a true L1 and then make that an L2 for everybody else. And then that becomes the interchain text, right?
Awesome. Cool. Well, that sounds good. I guess one of the other big things that I wanted to get is, so essentially when, like, let's say a user needs to, utilize the ZK snarks so that they can, selectively provide KYC AML to some
Yep,
maybe
yep,
DeFi
yeah,
protocol.
yeah.
Are these like trust providers essentially? Would you give them the information that's needed and then they know that that
Uh,
information's real, or?
Oh yeah, so for us, we really don't care in that sense, right? So
Yeah.
this is how in my head it is. So imagine Mickey and you are the two people involved in that sense, and I am running Panther protocol. A user comes to you, Patty, and you actually are providing the service, and Mickey is doing the KYC ML, like on a FIDO or somebody like that, right?
Hmm.
So you take the data, you pass it to Mickey. Mickey actually, verifies, gives you a Boolean. Then you run a prover. Panther runs a verifier. So for Panther, the proof has been verified, right?
Hmm.
Your constraint have been met, right?
Yeah.
As far as Panther is concerned, it doesn't matter. We don't want to be involved in dealing with that KYC AML thing. What happens then is like the proof for your KYC is kind of linked to your wallet in that sense, right? So this is the selective disclosure part, right?
Yeah.
The selective disclosure part is like, okay, when you go to HMRC or IRS, you go, oh, prove to us that you did the right thing. You go, yes, here you go. This is how it is. And the other part with that is like they can't actually use that proof and pass it on to somebody, and somebody can't use it, right? They can't send it to Elliptic, and they can't do any, they can't do jack shit with that,
Yeah.
right? So
That's funny. Cool. Well, that helps. So yeah, what kind of like, so there's kind of like Civic is a KYC AML, or like Global ID is doing kind of things where they collect
yeah,
people's, they get all your information and they take control of that. But
yeah, we are not involved in the business at all. So the reason why we thought this would be the path to go is like DeFi is actually having a lot of pressure from the governance space towards getting governance, right? We want to actually provide privacy for people in DeFi. And if we need to exist in such a manner that we could allow the governments of the world to decide whatever the hell they want to do, we want to be able to be regulation agnostic. We are not in the process of running regulatory arbitrage, right? So it's like,
mhm,
you could be based out of, in the previous example, Patty, you could be based out of Hong Kong, right? For all we care, we don't really care, right? So as long as you provide the KYC requirement, meet the KYC requirement, and the protocol is happy to do that, it completely is done. So in a sense of speaking, at some point in time when DeFi meets regulation, because like, look, the real challenge in this world is the following. If you are a skeptic and you're going to use a cynical glass and look at DeFi, okay, you will probably see a lot, it's a class abstraction glass, okay? So what I mean by class abstraction glass is like, you're an alien, your alien glass has its ability to look at ideas and say, this class is equivalent to that class. So when you put on, as an alien, you put on this class abstraction glass and you look at DeFi and financial engineering, you're an alien, you have no difference, right? You
mhm.
go, yeah, a lot of the things over here looks the same over there. So that's the way I look at it. So I've been playing around with, I used to get like paid fiat for doing some work for lots of people, including some hedge funds and other people, right? So the way I think about it is like, a lot of the things that's happening in DeFi are the things that are already happening in CeFi. But the so-called information arbitrage, the traditional sense, right, has decreased significantly. So information arbitrage is like if you want to get into a deal, unfortunately, it's getting into DeFi as well. So for example, like you're running in a very exciting project, you won't be able to get a seed allocation unless you know the people, right? You know what I'm saying, right?
Yes.
So that kind of thing is there. So the classic example I'm saying is like there exists like a bunch of information arbitrage that's much more pronounced in the CeFi world, whereas in the DeFi world, like as you were asking me, will you be going to be listing on Uniswap? I said anybody could, right? That's the leveler, right? And this is what I'm saying. So we want to be leveling that information arbitrage at the same time trying to actually kind of be on the right side of regulation in that sense, because like we can't really run against the governments of the world who have trillions of dollars at their disposal to contain things, right? It'll be very difficult. Whenever the DeFi meets the CeFi at the edges, which could be the exchanges, I'm sure you're recognizing what's going on in Binance in the UK, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So literally, this is the thing. So remember what I was telling you about the castles and the bazaars, right? So this is like the gatekeepers, literally, right? So whenever you want to go into a castle, you have the gatekeepers there, right? And you have this drawbridges, right? So this is exactly what is happening. We need to get past this gatekeeper. So we need to have mechanisms by which, irrespective of what is happening, provide the users with privacy and still be able to do or enable them to achieve what they want to do and still, keep the upside as much as we can, because like there's some cost involved in doing privacy, right?
Cool. Yeah. So one of the things I saw an interview with your other co-founder, Oliver Gale, and he was like, we can't really deal with what these governments or institutions are going to do, but what we can do is give people the choice if they want to participate in that system. So
Yeah.
I kind of love where you guys are. It's really just about sovereign choice. We in a great world, you could do whatever you want or whatever as long as it doesn't hurt people, but it's not where we live.
Nope. Absolutely, it's 100%. Like I mean, we are in a strange sense of speaking, we are a pretty oldish team, as in like everybody in the team has done a lot of work in various places. In fact, like in addition to a CFO, there is also somebody in the tech team who was a CFO for like 15 years, like a fully qualified chief architect is like somebody who understands finance, like traditional finance, like really, really well, right? So you can imagine our conversation. So we are like trying to be as pragmatic as possible. We want to make sure that we have high ideas, we try not to compromise, but, as I said, we could be who we want on the decentralized world, but in the real world, you need to have your coffee, you need to have your food. For that, you need to have the ability to have a better instrument, right?
Yeah, it kind of brings me back to the old saying. It's like, don't hate the player, hate the game. It's like you got to operate within the game's bounds.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
And to follow this up, so not that any like I'm just gonna kind of look for examples here, but like what kind of parties could act as a trust or a service provider? Not that they necessarily would, but just so people could get like an idea of what kind of entities out there would act in that way.
Okay, I'm going to give a very simple example.
Yeah.
Given we were talking about the controversial one, say Binance, right?
Yeah.
So for Binance, it's like they are a bridge from this, decentralized world to a centralized world, right? They could be acting like a service provider, right? A trust provider. So for the KYC thing that you are asking, for every customer they have to have KYC, right?
Yeah.
At least in most places, right? So what happens is like, can you just do the same thing for protocols? So now, in addition to you being a massive exchange, you're also adding value to the ecosystem, right? So you're allowing average users and institutions to actually add more value to the DeFi ecosystem, while you can charge people to do that. I mean, I'm pretty sure people will be happy to pay a tiny amount to for Binance to do this. They already charge us anyways. So if you bump up your price by a pence for the transaction, so you could actually run a proof of verify mechanism. Why not?
Yeah, so they could actually act as both basically if they wanted
Yep.
to. Okay,
If they
cool.
wanted to,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that definitely helps. And then one of the other things, so like we know that, I think a lot of people have heard of Zcash or like Monero at this point.
Yeah,
And then
sure.
there's some other like protocols that are out there that maybe aren't L1s, but I was just
Yeah.
wondering in regards to where maybe those have struggled to gain adoption and, whatever their ultimate goals like get there, what are you guys doing to build on that or, you know?
Sure. Yeah. So full disclosure, I have been at the edges of these protocols in that sense. So I've watched what has happened over the years, and when at points in time when other people have cloned at least one protocol, I was approached to help them verify their process in that sense. So I've been watching this very carefully from a distance, right? Without getting into the pool in that sense. So the key challenge you have is like, if you are going to do privacy in a complete sense with no reveal, then the government's taken an adversarial view of you, right? So we are kind of saying, we don't really care what you do before you come in, right? It's like a typical thing what you do in a normal world, right? Like, if when you go to the bank, they ask you for KYC AML and then give you some money, right? If you look at your money, I don't know if you read the paper about analysis of US dollars, right? Every secretion, and including how could I say, drugs and everything else.
Yeah.
Remnants of that. So the thing here is like, you go prove KYC, then you have KYC. You're given a bunch of money. You have anonymity to do whatever you want. You want to buy drugs. You want to shove it up the wrong parts of the anatomy. How come otherwise, those things are on a green paper, right?
Yeah.
So this is how the policy that we take is like, there has to be some sense of a normality in that sense, where things that humans are used to in their normal behavior, we need to try copy that behavior. And we can't actually provide privacy by changing people's behavior, right? Changing people's behavior is really, really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody knows, like, I'm pretty sure, I've been in security for the last 22 plus years. And we have this, when I started out, there was this thing that was there where you go security, right? So there's a gate that was there. And what has actually happened is the tire tracks, right? So people are going around the road, like going around the speed bump, literally, right? The speed bump is there to reduce the speed, but, they just go around. So that's literally what it is. Like, we need to enable people to do things while not causing friction. So if you go into a completely private protocol, it typically involves a bunch of problems, and it involves a bunch of friction as well. So, keep the user behavior as close to normal as possible. Try improve privacy as much as we can. At one point, one side of the fence, allow people to do whatever they want to do. Like, leave the protocol and go, if they want to climb trees, let them climb trees. They are all people who are completely in control of their future, right? Like, we can't tell anybody what to do and what not to do. So if somebody wants to do something, enable them to do that for a specific set of transactions. That's how Panther sees the world, right? Like, we are not going to go provide privacy for everything. We are only going to do privacy for just a subset of DeFi transactions that when you come in, you want to do, we'll provide you with that. And when you're out, you do whatever you want. We don't really care.
Well, yeah, I think that's a good explanation there. And I'm kind of curious as like a real world example. So like, let's say if I go to a yard sale and, right now I can just give somebody cash. There's no record of that or anything,
Yeah.
that can tie me and the party that I exchange with.
Yeah.
With Panther, would it be possible for basically, like, let's say me and you want to do a transaction like in the same vein, but we don't have cash. We have, some cryptocurrency, and it
Yeah.
would be private, basically.
I
You
mean,
could do like a
in that sense,
P2P.
yeah, this is where the bridge problem comes in. Like,
Mhm.
internal to the protocol, you can have complete privacy. When you leave, you actually have this problem, right? So when you leave, as in like, imagine you and I were doing transactions, and you and I were doing, I am from India, I have an Indian rupees, and you have US dollars, right?
Mhm.
You see where I'm going?
Yeah.
So if both of us are in US dollars, that's not a problem. I can give you that. So this is the problem we are going to face. So if you're coming in from someplace else, you want to get into Panther and do this, then you need to go through a bridge to get in. So at that point in time, depending on where you get in, you might or might not run into KYC problems, right? So
Yeah.
that's the same problem. Like I have a bunch of Indian money, I want to buy US dollars. I go to a bank, the bank will definitely ask me for KYC, but there are people who provide you with at a premium things, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
I don't want to be, I don't want to be suggesting anything to anybody. I'm just saying there are always finitely many paths to do the same thing. So.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I get what you're saying there. So, Mickey, I want to see that's like most of the questions I have directly on Panther Protocol. I did want to ask you a couple questions about DeFi in general, if
Sure.
you can answer those. But Mickey, I want to see if you have anything else before we move to that.
I don't have anything at the moment, but I'm sure as he goes on with DeFi, I'll have more questions. I'm just not sure which direction he wants to go in. So let me just wait. I have two in my head, but I don't want to bring them up yet.
Okay. Yeah.
Should I be worried?
We'll find out. Yeah. Well, let me open it up. So these are going to be more, general questions. I just kind of want to get your thoughts on the DeFi space since you've been around, in blockchain for a long time now, and not everybody has the same perspective that you do. So basically, what are your thoughts on where DeFi is now, and what does the future, look like? What is your vision of it in the long run?
And can I guess I could add right on top of that, Patty. Do you see privacy being a big part of bringing institutions into the world of DeFi as we move forward?
Okay, so let me start from the last piece forward and go back, right? So I'm going to give you an example so people understand examples, right? Renaissance Technologies. I don't know if you heard of them. They're one of the biggest hedge funds in the world. They have a fund that's only accessible to the employees that returns at least 50%, 40 to 50% per year. So the question, the $1 million or $1 billion question is, can anyone tell us exactly what strategy they have? The answer is no, right? So why is it possible? Because they can have transactions with privacy. This is exactly what I'm saying. So in general, if an institution wants to come in, number one, they want to have KYC. Number two, they want to have the ability to go back to the regulator and prove to them selective disclosure, okay? And then the other problems come in. If you have an alpha, and if you deploy it onto a normal blockchain, effectively, if I just have something just analyzing who's doing well, I could literally put a smart contract on going the graph, deploy subgraph onto a smart contract you are doing, copy the trade, the depth of the market disappears, right? If I'm more adversarial, I could go sandwich attacks, front running, back running. Okay, so these are the kind of things they really don't want to get into. So privacy, to a degree, at least in the way that Panther is looking, could to a very large degree solve all these problems. We can definitely provide them with KYC. We can definitely provide them with selective disclosure. The way we are, providing privacy, it gives a very high level of assurance against, MEV attacks, which is like front running, back running, sandwiching, right? So that's one set of answers for that problem. Okay, going back to DeFi. So Romba is telling you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I just want to jump in just because I don't know if everybody will know what alpha is in your example. But basically it's okay. It's a very finance term, which but basically for anybody that didn't get that, it's abnormal returns over like the market. So if you have a really good strategy, then Panther could provide you with a way so people can't copy it. But I just wanted to add that in, but go ahead.
Thank you. That's very kind. I completely missed that. Okay, now going back to DeFi, right? So the way I think about DeFi is the following. So I think of DeFi in layers. So like I kind of think of it in 3 layers. The lowermost layer is the blockchain layer, which is like the layer where you keep the state. Essentially, it's a state and state transition layer. Then there's a layer where you actually have logic. The logic essentially is where you do things, right? And then there is this finance layer, which is like, you can even add one more, but I'm not going to go into the governance layer. I'll keep it in 3, right? So when you sandwich all 3, this is where you have DeFi, right? So you were asking me previously in a previous question, and I was saying like, if I had a magical glass of aliens have of abstraction, which I call it the abstraction glasses. If I look at DeFi and if I look at financial engineering, I see same classes happening, right? So if you think about it that way, the evolutionary DeFi is like, okay, you have a bunch of strategies that actually have worked in traditional financial engineering world. There are some modifications done, right? Some are like one-to-one maps, some modifications done, and you deploy. And the success of that is kind of, led to more and more evolution. And the other thing that I would say is like, there are a couple of things that one should understand. Innovation always happens when there is a lot of openness. Okay, so in one sense of speaking, centralized finance is kind of bounded. You can't randomly create a product. If you create a product, the regulators would be interested before you can offer it to anybody. In DeFi, you and I can now create a product, right? You go, Anish, Mickey, Patty, a protocol. It could be something else, like, I don't know, a whole bunch of different Lego blocks being put together, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that is a very interesting thing. And as I was describing, startups are like a constraint optimization problem. And in the world could be thought of as a constraint optimization problem. The set of all alpha creating things could be thought of as a constraint optimization problem. So DeFi could be thought of as a global maxima for constraint optimization problem, which can actually be even better in theory than centralized finance, because you could go faster, it's cheaper, the regulatory arbitrage is lower.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Yes, that does. Yeah, it's just kind of like, when you have a lot more range of possibilities, yeah, you think you have a
Yes.
higher likelihood of possibly advancing.
Yeah. The story of like monkeys creating Shakespeare, if there are enough of monkeys, enough of time, there you go.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. Mickey, any last questions? I think we're probably close to wrapping this up.
I guess I would say, is there any type of new sector of DeFi that could come from this new privacy concept with institutions and people using retail? Do you think that we could see new types of DeFi protocols being built? And do you think that there is going to be an attraction from a lot of the DeFi community who wants to be regulatory compliant, but also really prides themselves and wants that privacy? Do you think this is going to spur, the next evolution?
It is very possible.
DeFi?
Yeah, so let me play this back in a slightly different way, so it makes sense for a lot of people. Look, most people have. I'm assuming you're based in the US. You have a 401k, right?
Mm-hmm.
So your 401k is actually handed out to the CFI, and if you're looking at a pension fund, and if you know the musical chair of pension funds, most of them don't have enough money to actually do that. So it is very possible that people like you, who actually currently are believing and trusting a CFI to do management of your pension, kind of take a small fraction of it, still use protocols that provide privacy, because you don't want to reveal a lot of things about everything, because like if you have an insurance provider, the insurance provider is actually mining blockchain. It will, your healthcare insurance provider, anybody who actually has an arbitrage being run, you can literally convert that into a lemon market. So privacy is an important thing in that sense. But in a slightly different sense, you could do all the things that other people provide you at a far better efficiency than currently CFIs can do. Like if you look for the hurdle for a pension fund, if you invest into pretty much any protocol, you'll get better than that.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Did
So this could kind of open the door for pension funds and stuff like that to get in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was wondering when that would happen, because it's like the bond market is just not there for them.
Yield
and
inversion. Yield inversion. It's a negative yield now.
Yeah, exactly. And especially if you count it with inflation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just
wow,
looking
yes.
terrible. Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
I love to hear that, because there's a lot of money out there in that way that needs to find yield and not just be reliant on equity prices. So
absolutely,
that's really cool. I do like to hear that. But yeah, is there anything else that maybe you wanted to say about Panther Protocol or about your team or anything before we wrap this up, or do you feel like you covered everything pretty well?
I don't know. You never know, right? This is
Yeah,
one
it's
of the
all right.
problems you have. Like,
we just talked a lot.
Yeah. The only thing I say is like, we are a bunch of people who have been doing this for a very long time. I think between all of us, we probably were up to like between 40 and 50 protocols in total. So, in that sense, it's like experience from building lots and lots of things coming into a team, and that team is trying to do. We all acknowledge the fact that there is some of the things that we want to do are a bit of a stretch, but we knew we could definitely draw a line and go like, we will stop here, right? So for example, that the thing I was talking about pensions, right? In an ideal world, I would love to do that, right?
Hmm.
Essentially open up the pension funds of the world and allow them to actually have real alpha so that people who actually put real money into 401k can retire, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Not when you retire, you have to still work because your 401k has not returned any yield in that sense. So that is, like a stretch goal for people like us. I mean, in many ways, as I said, I mentioned it during our conversation. We absolutely believe in openness. We really believe in being fair, right? So, we want actually the society to have upside of both having privacy and actually having DeFi. That's our goal.
Awesome. I love that. And yeah, on the 401k thing, I mean, I'm only 25 and I already see all the issues with them because like I have my dad was close to retire, he's retiring and
Yeah,
that market
yeah,
crash happened last year. It was very scary. Sure, he's
absolutely.
fine now, but
Yeah,
it's just like
yeah,
what happens if you're one of the people that just gets the short end of the stick, They're
yes,
very
absolutely. In
limited.
2007, 2008, this
Exactly, yeah.
really happened. Yeah,
So, and who knows, it could happen again. Things change so
yeah,
quickly. So,
yeah.
yeah, I love where you guys are coming from, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. I think anybody that listens is going to find this super interesting, and we will keep our eyes peeled for the first proof of concept you guys put out.
Oh, can I say something? Can I
Yes.
plug in?
Oh yeah, tell
So
people where to like find information and all that stuff too. Yeah.
yes, and a couple of things. So I am on the lookout for somebody, ideally somebody with an undergrad in math or computer science. If they have done their time in a business school, that'll be awesome. Kind of an analyst in a big four will be super awesome for me. That's somebody I want to work with because like I wear three hats. So I am the CTO, and kind of the chief scientist, and kind of the chief strategist. So when I wear the chief strategist hat on, the question you asked me about DeFi, I run pipelines. I want somebody to take that over from me so that I can talk to them and they can run pipelines and look at things and tell me what's happening. That's one. Two is I am really looking for awesome programmers, especially cryptographic research engineers in that sense. So it's like if you are somebody into cryptography, very heavy, please reach out to us. Okay. And the third person that I'm after is anybody who is into zero knowledge proof systems, especially Snarks. Uh, yes, we absolutely require more people. I know in the world there are only few. Anybody who's listening to this who have been heavily into zero knowledge proof systems, who wants to work with an awesome team, uh, please reach out to us. So how do we find us? You can find us on, I think on Twitter. You can find us on pantherprotocol.io and on Telegram and all the normal usual places.
Awesome. Yeah, I know I'm in your guys' Telegram group and you guys have an
Oh,
announcement channel too, which is really helpful just to see tweets you guys put out or, announcements.
yeah.
And highly encourage everybody to check out their website. There is a lot of information there. Um, and yeah, maybe hopefully this gets you somebody that you're looking for. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be awesome. That'll be
Yeah.
awesome because, like, it's really, really hard to get awesome people. So, most of my team are people I knew who I worked with prior to this in multiple projects. So I'm lucky to have a very large network and having worked
Yeah.
with a lot of protocols. Not everybody's that lucky, but even then, I am struggling to find people. So anybody who fits any of the three above, please reach out to us.
Cool. Oh, and I guess last, are they part-time workers or full-time that you're looking for? Just so people know.
Oh, yeah. So the cryptographic research engineer is the ZK research engineer full time. The analyst, I am happy to have them part time. So it's like if somebody really wants to work full time, we can work full time. So I can give you more problems to work on. But as it stands right now, my current list of things to be done, if you are smart enough, you could probably do it in part time.
Okay, awesome. Well, that's exciting. Hopefully, I hope somebody that's listening can find that opportunity because those don't pop up all the time. But yeah, thank you so much, Dr.
Thank
Anish
you.
Muhammad from Panther Protocol. Great conversation. I'm definitely gonna have to re-listen because we covered so much. But yeah, I hope you have a great weekend and This is the DeFi standard.
Right.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Thank you, Anish. Thank
Yeah.
you. This was an excellent conversation, and I really like the vision of what you're trying to do with bringing privacy to DeFi and interoperability. I wish you the best of luck, and we'll be covering this in the future. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you both. It's an honor to be on your podcast, and thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So to wrap it up, this is the DeFi standard, and we are out. See you guys.